Hello. Welcome to
Hi.
our first live book club, game club. I don't really know how to best condense that into one term. It's a book club that's also a video game club. GGNoReread as part of our podcast, No Cartridge.
Yeah. I feel like the pitch here is it's sort of like a book club, but then in the corner there's a kid playing on a PS2, and if you get bored, you can go over and see what he's up to.
Maybe that's the case.
Maybe I'm the kid. Maybe I'm over there and I'm playing Tony Hawk or something. This time I'm not. I'm playing Split Fiction on a PS2.
So introducing the idea of like what this even is, because hopefully there's new people coming to it from YouTube that are not just like already familiar with the podcast. So No Cartridge is a podcast that has been going for I don't know how many years now, since 2018. Is that right? 2017?
2016 maybe even.
Oh wow.
Yeah, forever.
And looking at video games through a critical lens, and so that includes like using theory and what kind of literature did you already include?
I guess a lot of like before we started doing this, I guess probably a lot of like critical Marxism and stuff like that. There was a short mini series reading through Capital, which was short because it was the same amount of labor as actually teaching a class on Capital, which was turned out to be a lot of labor as it happened. So there's a reason that's not usually a thing people do. But that and like just some books people wrote. But I think a lot of times like literature was sort of secondary, even though it's great love of mine. Secondary to theory and philosophy until we started doing this one, which kind of marries the two ideas. But yeah, a lot of Marxism, a lot of media studies. I think like Marx is probably the patron saint, but if you have to find another one, it's probably someone like I don't know, like maybe even someone like a Judith Butler or someone like that, like kind of approaching media from maybe Fred Jameson, something like that, like approaching media from a perspective outside of just reception and thinking about it a little more critically. So that's
not
that's the hope. No, he's in the background. If Marx is your patron saint, Hegel is the Holy Ghost.
Hegel's playing PS2 in the corner.
Hegel's playing. Hegel would. Hegel loves playing PS2. The guy was like obsessed with hypotheticals. I could only imagine what he would do with a console, let alone with Minecraft or something. That guy would have never written a book in his life.
Yeah.
We lucked out with him not being able to experience his best life.
Marx would have loved Split Fiction. Do we think that this is true?
I think Marx would have found it. I feel like this is like when you see someone say online, like if you gave a Dorito to a medieval peasant, it would completely ruin their lives. Like,
yeah.
I feel like if you showed Marx Split Fiction, his first question would be like, okay, it's like, how is this happening? Is this what life is? Is this real? And then you'd be like, no, it's a computer. I get to explain it. But once you got to the core of it, I feel like he would have liked that there's a sort of dialectic element to it, in that like the fantasy and the sci-fi end up sort of becoming their own thing in creativity. It's also anti-capitalist, so it's got that, or at least anti. It's probably not anti-capitalist because like at the end they're making money off their own work. It's not like it's anti-author.
Yeah. It's hard to be a product. Like a video game is a product to some extent, and to be fully anti-capitalist whenever it's a game like this. I don't know. Maybe that's not. No,
I think ultimately, like, if you want to look at Marx in the way that I think you probably should, his whole approach to contemporary capitalism is always something like, it would be great if we all didn't have money and stuff like that. But there's a reason capitalism exists, and there's a reason that there's these historical moments that sort of like contradict and produce something else. And I think in this case, looking at something like entrepreneurial verve and the ownership of ideas, we don't love those things, but it's better than a company stealing them from your brain and making money off of your dead labor. And so, like, it's a step in the right direction. It's an interesting sort of intervention into capitalism in that way. So I do think he would have liked it. I also think he would have liked the platforming elements.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think he would have thought it was really cool, really fun.
He was famously, Marx was very good at Crash Bandicoot. That is something the books won't tell you, but one of our foremost Bandicoot scholars.
Yeah. I think that Marx would also find it have a lot to say on the fact that like automation has been primarily highly accelerated in this like area of like arts and literature prior to automating anything actually like useful.
Yeah, I mean, there's something really interesting about that, and I think like this is something that the book touches on as well. I mean, it's almost like, I mean, I think if you want to imagine, so one of the things about sci-fi is it always imagines like an idealized world in a certain way. So even the dystopian sci-fi has an element of this sort of like wished for future in it, I would say. But certainly stuff like Death of the Author, or if you want to go back to something like Asimov, like the Foundation series, like you're looking at something where they're just like, I hope the future looks like this, right? And I think some of the ways that that we see in Death of the Author, I think some of the ways that we want the book and the author want the world to exist is like, maybe it would be cool if there were things that could help disabled people get around and streamline things that are difficult without necessarily putting too many people out of business. I mean, obviously AI cabs have already put people out of business, but the way they're presented in the novel is like they're not that much of an evil. They're just kind of like maybe a little dangerous.
And it's also like saying maybe this isn't for everyone. Maybe these automated cabs, maybe it is stupid for some people to use them. Like if you have other methods, but it's also saying like, okay, disabled people shouldn't be at the brunt of where like this more moralization of automated technology aids is going.
I think so. And I think like, if you want to accuse, and of course, because I don't have the book right in front of me, I'm just gonna look it up because I forget the author. Oh, Okorafor. Because Okorafor has like the there's the book. There it is, right there. The author of this book, George R.R. Martin. No, it's Nnedi Okorafor. I think one of the things that Okorafor sort of, maybe this is one of the more unrealistic elements of the book, is that like, the Zelu's family in the book sort of understands that the AI cabs are good for her and like why they're good for her, but not necessarily for everyone else. Like they're like, well, I wouldn't take those. And she's like, well, I would because I can't walk around very easily. And they're like, that makes sense. They don't let a lot of things go, but the only thing they really care about is that they're dangerous. They understand the sort of utility of them. I do think it's interesting though that, if you want to critique the novel for eliding some of the dangers of AI, which I mean, I think you could, one of the things that elides is that, and it's not entirely fair because it plays around with this idea a lot, but one of the things that elides is that like the thing that AI has most tried to, at this point, and AI creators have most tried to get rid of is creative jobs that are sort of seen as less than or part of like I don't know, like an owned lib caucus of jobs, right? Like, these poetry majors need to be put in their place by the tech lords, sort of thing.
Anyone who has a union, any union jobs are the ones that can get taken over by AI.
But AI has not been able to break into the IBEW. The electric workers are still strong. Let's hear for the IBEW, who sponsor the Phillies and also sponsor the livelihood of our electricians.
Yeah, I do feel like Australia has like a barrier against some of this, just because the tradies, The tradespeople of Australia are such a caucus.
Yeah. I feel like, you know, in America it's a little tricky because you get places like the Teamsters and yes, they are a strong union, but they also can be extremely easily bought out and ideologized. And I feel like the Teamsters and a lot of like the auto workers unions are they're susceptible to someone at the top being like, let's own all these like East Coast liberals who think they know what we do. And then all of a sudden you've lost, right? Like that's not the point of a union. You immediately become less strong if your focus is ever taken away from, you know, labor. Which I mean, I think that's a, you know, that's something that kind of goes back to the struggle in split fiction, wondering if this is like an anti-capitalist text or whatever. Like ultimately this is about saving two people's individual intellectual property, as opposed to, you know, it's not really about like making a union of authors or whatever. It would be a worse game if it was. It wouldn't be a very interesting narrative, probably. But it's not that, you know.
It does try to be a fun game, first and foremost. It's not necessarily teaching anything. I think that it's a very inoffensive plot line. And, you know, they never like touch back in with the other authors who were like plugged in with them. Like, what was their experience like of being in the machine? Was it really just positive, like how it was kind of described, that they got to go into their fantasy worlds and just like hang out?
I wondered about that too, because I think like it is interesting that only the one protagonist is like at all suspicious. Like everyone else is like, this is so fun. I get to like experience my places and maybe I'll get published. She's the only one who's like, wait, what's the catch? Which is, I mean, really very much like I think like a lot of you know, simpler narratives have this thing where like one person is just like a little smarter than everyone else. But yeah, I bet they had a good time. Like I think, you know, I would have a great time if
I would not question the machine.
I probably wouldn't either. Like I would be like, machine, please help me realize my wonderful dreams.
I think that wouldn't you have to though, if you're like doing a text like Mio, where all of the worlds that she's built are like these very scary sci-fi worlds where very bad stuff is happening. It's like, why would I want to go into that? Like, what plot line do I have where it would be fine just to hang out? I guess if you're like at the rave or whatever, like there are people just partying.
Well, it reminds me. I mean, the immediate sort of reference is the Alex Bleckman tweet, which is a sci-fi author. In my book, I invented the Torment Nexus as a cautionary tale. Tech company, at long last, we have created the Torment Nexus from the classic sci-fi novel. Don't create the Torment Nexus. But like, yeah, I mean, I think some sci-fi authors end up trapped in their own thing where they're just like, actually, though, like I do love innovation, and this does not resemble my horrible nightmare scenario. I'm always surprised more sci-fi authors aren't like extreme Luddites. I think if I wrote sci-fi for a living, I would break my computer.
Yeah. I don't understand
all these horrible situations. I can't imagine.
And you feel it kind of in the game too, that a lot of the worlds are similar iterations, at least like visually. Where, I mean, there's a lot of different types of sci-fi. There's a lot of different subgenre. But this is not like the Le Guin version of sci-fi. This is like a very hard military space sci-fi.
It's like Shadowrun. It's like, you know, it has a lot of similarities to that world. If anyone's done tabletop RPGing in Shadowrun or like Cyberpunk Red or whatever, it very much is that. Like, you know, you're in a horrible dystopian future filled with corporations that want you to, that want to like suck you dry. But then, like, I feel like people who are into that, like with the vaporwave aesthetic and stuff, you find so many fascists in that world. It's like,
yeah.
What did you get out of these texts? Like, what you read Neuromancer and you liked it. What did you get out of it, man? Like, what are you doing? I don't know. That's a. I feel like that's a fairly well-trodden critique, but I do wonder about it a lot.
People just used to write stuff too. Like I don't think like Philip K. Dick's like personal politics are anything aspirational.
He's a very lib guy. Like I think he mostly just like is like very much a Hillary man.
Maybe
like if
it's
no,
hard to
he is. Like,
translate it, I guess.
He's on Twitter all the time tweeting out like Mark Hamill stuff.
Philip K. Dick?
Sure. Oh, sorry. I'm thinking of sorry, I'm thinking of William Gibson.
Yep, yeah. Absolutely.
He spoke to me through the machine, Liv. The beam struck me in the head, just like what happened with PKD. And now I can see the Archon. I can see all of the trappings of the world. He's still alive. This is where I introduced that I've completely gone. No, I think you're
much
right.
Like Philip K. Dick.
I don't know if his politics were any good. I don't know if he really had the capacity to have politics. But like, you're right that he sort of wrote stuff, right? Like you look at
wrote stuff that was politically rich.
Yeah, like even stuff like I'm gonna look it up because I'm gonna forget the name of the book. But like even if you something like Ubik, right? Like or Valis, like Ubik is a book about where psychic powers are utilized in corporate espionage, while cryonic technology allows recently deceased people to be maintained in a lengthy state of hibernation. I don't necessarily know if that was like a politically good book. I don't think you hear people talk about Ubik as like a political novel that's interesting. People talk about Ubik as like a flawed novel that has like a ton of interesting ideas and questions and stuff. And I think like there's something really beneficial about that.
But that's kind of what I mean is like in Ubik, there's like, they go, it almost feels like a mausoleum, but you can like pull the souls out. It's been a while since I've read it. It's been at least like 7 years, I think. And so like that, I think that's politically interesting to imagine like, okay, what is the functioning of this business that's like holding people's souls in stasis somehow.
But I also think it's like, it's less immediately evident that Dick cares about the politics than say like someone like a William Gibson when writing Neuromancer. Like when you're reading about the corporations in Neuromancer, like, oh, this guy doesn't like corporations. Like this guy is critiquing these corporations. I think Dick sees them as like a very interesting element of the story, but it's like it becomes very difficult, especially once you know more about him, to unpack like, okay, are you making a political point? Is this a religious point? Do you see this as like an element of Gnosticism? Like what's going on here? And I mean, I think there's a very real way you can argue that they're superior texts as a result.
Yeah, the companies like in Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, like they're not good. But it's not like necessarily that the idea of a corporation is bad. It is like more of like a spiritual religious understanding of it. I think that he's more deliberately engaging with those aspects than like anything like capitalism or anything.
Yeah, and I think like, one of the things about Dick that really actually does quite nicely, it does quite nicely sort of like correspond to, something like Split Fiction, is that, and actually I will say maybe even more directly to Death of the Author, is that like the desires themselves are never, derided or degraded, right? Like it's not like the fact that our main character in Do Androids Dream like really wants a pet, like a real pet, or maybe he's okay having one that's like a robot too, but secret. Like the sort of like overwhelming desire of his, that's never made fun of. Like it's taken very seriously within the text, and it's like, this is just something he wants. Like the realization of it is he's often degraded within that, because like, it sucks for him that he constantly gets, like every pet he gets has like a panel on it. Like he just can't make it happen, right? And he's constantly trying to fool everyone, but the actual desire is never derided. And I think like that need to have is something that I think is really easy to sort of make fun of, but also something that's really important within, I don't know, within the text, and as a result, like within, the world of the text.
Well, it's a very collective desire. Like there is like a hierarchy of like the types of animals. Like the more rare an animal is, like you do have like neighbors jealousy over your llama or whatever. I don't really remember exactly what all
Yeah.
animals were in it, but it is like a collective desire for like something real. Like that's what I mean. It's just like
Yeah.
they're just writing some shit, and it's able to be really interesting. Whereas like I don't know where we started from this, but it was something about that it's hard to not. I don't know what kind of sci-fi you're writing if you're not trying to do something like that.
Yeah, I think on some level, like the subsummation, or this is, yeah, the subsummation of the um like the world into the sort of tech utopia, like the fact that we've all been dragged into this weird dream of Silicon Valley, that we're going to create like a new god or whatever. Like I feel like we're all being dragged along with this all the time. And on some level, I feel like it's tricky, especially now, to write sci-fi that isn't, like, that does what like Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep does, which is like it kind of just like brings you along for the ride and allows you to make your own conclusions. I feel like on some level you have to be didactic with your sci-fi now in order to differentiate it from the real world. And in being didactic, you can of course take the other position, which is like, actually it's good that machines can write a bunch of books based on my ideas. The problem is that guy in the book, was in the video game, wasn't paying them enough. Like he should have paid Mio enough money so that it was acceptable for him to steal all our ideas. That's just efficient. Like there are a lot of sci-fi writers that would believe that, and so like it, even the dystopia just ends up being like, well, I'm not rich in this dystopia. I'm not getting paid enough. And once
I
that's
guess
the issue,
I guess I'm thinking like in split fiction, there's less like complicated, like there's less complications of the world. So you're
yeah,
imagining this world where this machine is real. That suggests that there's some kind of higher level of technology available in whatever this near future world is than our own. But then whenever like the CEO is like talking to the other members of the board, it's just on like Skype, it's on
yeah,
Discord. Like there's no like future thinking there. And then like I think what is interesting that maybe could have been discussed more is whenever Mio's talking about her father's been very, very sick.
yeah,
And she kind of has like this medical trauma, hospital trauma related to it, like does not want to see wires, etc. Like being hooked up to something is kind of what set her off to like not want to be part of the machine.
right.
And so that it is in this world where this greater technology is available, but also maybe medical care is still inefficient, and that's not something where those technologies are, like it just
Yeah,
seems like
no,
it's
I totally
isolated to
agree.
this like single machine.
It isn't a
um
full world. Yeah, I agree with you. I think like there's something within split fiction, and it makes for a better story as a result, because you don't have to worry about that stuff. It basically says like, no, 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 just focus on this one thing, which I mean makes for like a more fun action movie. You think about something like the Mission Impossible movies. Like I just watched Mission Impossible 7, like the second to last one. I haven't watched the newest one, but we watched the second to last one. Kristen and I did, and it was a lot of fun. And it was like popcorn movie. It was an action film, right? But like the premise of that film, if you haven't watched it, is that there's this monster intelligent AI that's being released, and it can basically any country that weaponizes it controls truth. And so like it's a whole issue, right? They bring it up, but like, yeah, like it affects how like Ethan Hunt talks with his colleagues, and like it affects like who can I trust, who can't I trust, and all. It doesn't really affect like how the rest of the world works. Like the AI isn't screwing up point of sale systems so Ethan can't buy a ticket to get out of the country, or like it's not writing, it's not like sneaking into government databases or something to reauthor citizenship documents and stuff. It truly is just like, it basically is like, what if AI was a super spy? And I think in this case, in Split Fiction, it's a similar thing where like, you're basically like, well, what if technology tried to be a better author than you? And that's like an interesting story. It's like a fun action story. It is not a totalized world, I think, in the way that, say, like Death of the Author sort of aspires to.
Yeah, and we talked about that on the podcast episode, is that to its credit, Split Fiction does not try to weigh you down with a lot of plot points or anything. That it's not the script is pretty,
it's light,
direct, and it's playful. All of the bosses, they don't really monologue, they just talk in kind of like raid boss quotes. Like they're all very like campy M. Bison kind of moments.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it is a video game, because like I think Take-Two, or what's the it's not Take-Two. I always think it should be Take-Two.
Hazelight?
Yeah, Hazelight, thank you. I don't know why I always think it should be Take-Two. I guess it's because it's like a 2-player thing. But Take-Two made other stuff, not this. But like Hazelight, like, you know, in focusing on these co-op games, It Takes Two and Split Fiction specifically, I feel like, you know, they are hyper fixated on making a game that comments on games, right? Like this is much more about games than it is about literature. It's a game about games, and like that's a strength. And I think if you try to make it a little more political, it would fall apart a bit. But I also think it does limit, you know, how much we can take from this text.
Yeah, I mean, it's so experiential, and how you're experiencing it. It's like that it's about the co-op experience, and it's about shared memories of gaming, and
and I mean the benefits that you have in gaming, of like gaming with someone, you know, right? Like the vistas that open up when you're actually sort of like cooperating with someone. This is like what people talk about with couch co-op, is like, you know, there is a feeling of playing in the same room as someone where you realize like, oh, the two of us together, we have different knowledge, but like we can actually we can get further in this game together because we have that different knowledge. That I think kind of falls apart a little bit in non-couch co-op. And so like, I think it's definitely hearkening to that.
Yeah, Death of the Author is definitely more deliberately complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. As we talked about on the podcast with like the ending and everything like that, the fact that both of us took different thoughts from it and everything, like I feel like, yeah, this is a much more complicated text.
Yeah, just the like both of the texts that are within it, from the like, I guess slightly contemporary, probably like 20, 50 years in the future, like it's something where,
yeah,
and I do think it's like really like realistic. Like we were talking about how there's like a I think like the most clear marker of where this is in the future is that they say there's like an old man who looks like he lived through the COVID riots, and I think that's the only thing that's like deliberately about what's going on. But I do think it's really realistic in how we're probably not going to have that much innovation, useful to us innovation. Like there's going to be all sorts of like tech stuff going on that's not being reflected in like day-to-day lives for a lot of people. Just 50 years ago, that technology is much more different to now than I feel like it's going to be. Like she's still using a similar kind of phone, like it's something adjacent to an iPhone, and she's using social media apps that seem pretty similar to our apps. That it feels like that kind of dreaming of something more and actually like enacting that is slowing down. And so I to its credit, like is trying to imagine a better world, imagine having some futuristic viewpoint of the world that's different and not just cynical.
Yeah, and I think like, you know, including Africa in the text, like and bringing in the African perspective is helpful with that, in that, like, I feel like a lot of texts thinking about the future and thinking about dystopia, particularly written by white people, are going, and Western white people for that matter, are going to imagine like, oh yeah, like Africa and South America, they're too hot to live in now, right? Like it's an easy way to wipe out places that you aren't really going to think about. And the fact that Africa takes such like a critical, position in this text, even within Rusted Robots, to be like, the spot where, they're the spot where the future kind of is, or the holder of the future sort of is within, the robot and the ghost, or the human, the ghost. Like I feel like that is such a useful way of cutting that easy dystopian viewpoint and making it way more complex. I think that, like thinking about AI not as something that enslaves us immediately, but as something that's sort of like a janky technology that people are still working at, or imagining climate change as something that, doesn't burn up the world in 10 years, but isn't mediated enough to really stop producing side effects. So we're all living with the after effects of it as a sort of like, I don't know, constant trauma. It's like a lot more interesting. Like I think it's just a lot more interesting and a lot more realistic, as you say. Like it's smarter.
Yeah, and it's not that it doesn't spend a lot of time like talking about climate change. Like that's I think the idea of like the Rusted Robots text is that it is like past the point that humans really can live. I don't think that it's saying. I mean, that is why they like mostly died out, right? Like there's like the last human in the Rusted Robots text.
Yeah, it's not like a Nier Automata thing where they're like, oh yeah, then there was all the war, and then that's
the water wars. Let's talk about the water wars.
Yeah, it's not the water wars, which are gonna happen. They might, but the thing is, like, it's not that.
I don't think they're gonna call them that, but I think they're already happening.
You don't think they're gonna call them that? That would be so like clarifying, though. You think they want to hide what the wars are? That's weird.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, you're totally right. No, I agree. I think Nier Automata mentioned, that's right, and it's going to get mentioned again. But yeah, it's like one of the things I think is really cool about Death of the Author is that it is, well, what sells it for me as a text in a lot of ways is that it is the same menial, insulting stuff that we're dealing with today in terms of work and in terms of creative production and in terms of like making a living, and it just like it's in the future. And I think there's an urge in writing or thinking about the future where you're just like, oh yeah, all that stuff goes away and there's even worse problems. And like it reminds me of one of my most cited and annoyingly cited Twilight Zone episodes where it's about this gangster who dies and he thinks he goes to heaven because everything works out for him. And then at the end, he realizes that because nothing can go wrong, it's actually hell. And like that's the big twist. I feel like in this case, like
I watched that. It was called The Good Place.
Oh my god. Yeah, I watched The Good Place. It took me 20 minutes, and it included Rod Serling.
It sounds like a better version.
Yeah, it's The Better Place. But yeah, no, it's like those menial things, those like small hells of like an inconvenience, or I'm frustrated by something, or I'm bored by something, or something insults me. I have to take some sort of like personal kind of like criticism that makes me feel like lesser than. Like how much of that actually plays into what makes life annoying when it's annoying and like bad when it's bad. It's not even necessarily that it has to be worse. You don't even have to like make up a worse world. You can just take the world, extrapolate it out, keep the annoyances, and make some things worse. And it's just as equally effective as like this is like kind of like messed up that in 70 years we still have to worry about adjunct teachers not getting paid.
Yeah, I think that these ended up being very interesting texts together because of like how different their approach is.
Totally.
in their, you know, respective topics. I really, whenever I picked them, that I thought that they were going to be more similar in like what they were actually doing, that it was like
Right.
about the like creation of a world, and like in a way they both are, but it's very different than what I anticipated it being.
Yeah, and me too. I mean, part of this is because I threatened off air to do this, but you know, my theory brain loves to think about stuff like this, because I don't get to anymore, because turns out outside of a very rarefied part of academia, you're not supposed to just like think about literary criticism. So people don't like to talk about it. It's weird. But you know, the name of the novel, the name of Okorafor's novel, The Death of the Author, it pulls from, and you know, she didn't say this specifically, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say pulls from the essay, and also the sort of like theoretical concept of the death of the author. The essay is written by Roland Barthes. Sort of like in many ways, Barthes is a formalist, kind of like he's a formalist, but also a structuralist. He likes he has texts on fables and you know, just things that you can kind of taxonomize and think about in terms of like, you know, they have this, and this, but you know, these set of fables don't have that, or this does. Or he'll go out into the world. There's one of his books. What is that book called? I'm gonna actually look it up, because I do want to recommend it. Mythologies. Yeah, okay. It's called Mythologies. But he goes out and he looks at various things in the world. Like he has a chapter on wrestling. He has a chapter on like art. It's really interesting. Like he just looks at the world within the structure of myth. So he's a structuralist. But as a structuralist, one of the things he becomes fascinated with, and one of the things that he's most famous for, is deconstructing the idea of an author. Both in this text and another text called Camera Lucida, which is about photography, and we don't have to go into. But you know, The Death of the Author is available if you Google it, Barthes, Death of the Author. There's a site on UPenn that has it. It's, you know, pretty good translation. But you know, there's a paragraph in here where he sort of talks about it, because I think, which is worth looking at, because I think one of the one of the things that the novel The Death of the Author gets that a lot of people don't get about the theory of the death of the author is that in writing a text, understanding that the author has been decentralized, the idea of intention has been problematized, it doesn't mean that the author does not actually exist anymore. That intention doesn't actually exist anymore. It's more that there is some level of, I don't know, some level of like indecision. And so Barthes says in there, I'll quote a little bit from it, and I think it, you know, enriches the Okorafor text. Once the author is gone, and he uses capital A author, the claim to, quote, decipher a text becomes quite useless. To give an author to a text is to impose upon the text a stop clause, to furnish it with a final signification to close the writing. This conception perfectly suits criticism, which can then take as its major task the discovery of the author or his hypostases, society, history, the psyche, freedom, beneath the work. Once the author is discovered, the text is, quote unquote, explained. The critic is conquered. Hence, it is scarcely surprising not only that historically the reign of the author should also have been that of the critic, but that criticism should be overthrown along with the author. So this is, you know, some people take this really seriously and say, like, you know, we need to do shallow reading. That was a big thing when I was in grad school, where like instead of deep reading, you just read and say like immediately, like, this text made me feel like this, and say like, that's all we can take from literature. I think what Barthes is kind of, obviously I don't like that, but you know, I think what Barthes is saying there is like, you know, if you take down the sort of like capital A author, if you say like, you know, there's more to this text than, I mean, even take Death of the Author, there's more to this text than Okorafor wants to say, but I think within the text, you say there's more to this novel that Zelu is writing than is contained in Zelu's understanding of it. Or if you want to say is contained in Ankara's understanding of it, the robot within Rusted Robot, or Rusted Robots. If you imagine that's the sort
allegedly
of like true text, yeah, if that's the true text, whichever is the true text, the author has like is not fully like in control of. There's stuff that escapes it, right? But I think what's interesting about this point here is that it's like you can't give it a final signification. He says you can't give it, like, you can't just like discover the author and then explain the text and then conquer it and say like, I figured it out, I did it. Which, you know, in fairness is what a lot of criticism pre-1960s did. It said like, here's what it's about. Instead, you sort of like in saying that the author is displaced, you don't say that like, okay, it's death of the capital A author. It's not death of the little a author. There's millions of authors. Even the author, you reading the text, you produce your own reading of it, right? But what it does is it frees you to sort of interpret as opposed to explain. And I think, you know, that element of interpretation is kind of critical. I mean, it's critical in split fiction as well, because it's about their own interpretation of their own work. But I think particularly in Death of the Author, this idea that, you know, say like Zelu's family can read her novel and not get it, right? Like not even remotely understand what she's saying. And she keeps saying, this is like, I was so obvious, like it was so clear about this, right? Like it was so obvious that like, this is how I felt about it. Why can't they understand? Why can't they appreciate it? Why can't they understand like, you know, who I am and this sort of thing? Like they don't want her to go to space. They don't want her to get the what do they call them? Like the cybernetics basically that helped her move, the exos.
The exos.
And it's like, well, how could you understand? How could you love the book and not understand that this is what I wanted? Or the people who, you brought it up in the podcast, the person who accuses her of being ableist. Like, how could you think that of me? How could you assume that that's what I'm doing by getting these exos? And it is because like intention is not easy, and intention is slippery and gets away. And I think that is something that is so important in understanding Okorafor's text.
Yeah. Well, thank you for reading from that. And
of course, yeah. I like Bart a lot. He's a really interesting critic. He's very much misunderstood, I think, because of Death of the Author, because people think he's just like much like Jacques Derrida, like the whole, you know, if people read him and say like, well, nothing means anything then, right? So that's easy, and that's just not really the case. I think Camera Lucida is a really interesting piece. If I was really brave, I would say we should play Fatal Frame and read Camera Lucida, but I'm not very brave. But Camera Lucida is all about this photo he takes of his mother. And he's trying to explain like how photography works. This is a real preoccupation of people in the 50s and 60s. How does it work as art? How does it work as text? Mm-hmm. And he says like, you know, there's a, what does he call it? It's a studium and a punctum, and the studium is, the base material of the photograph. So what is in it? How is it framed? You know, how did you construct the shot? Whatever, right? And then the punctum is how it makes you feel. And he says like, I can convey the studium, but what's actually crucial in a photograph and illegible to everyone else is this punctum, is this way I feel. And he talks about this photo of his mother and he describes it and he says like, actually though, I'm not going to show it to you because what it means to me and what it looks like can't be conveyed to you because you don't have the punctum. And I think like, you know, that like tension between, you know, being sort of a critic and being someone who interprets and then understanding that nothing can be fully interpreted because everything has a piece of personal experience. I could see why that would speak to Okorafor. I can see why that sort of concept speaks to her, and why she would like, you know, why she would draw that influence into her text via the title.
I feel like that could be said for basically like every art though. That like there's no point even, you know, showing you my Raylo furry fan fiction because you can look at it, but you're not gonna feel what
you're still gonna show me it though, right?
Yeah. Yeah, after we end stream.
Yeah, okay, good. A little scared there. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, one of the things that is really important about Camera Lucida is it's written in the tradition of the work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction and all the people trying to figure out photography, because photography at that point, I mean, you could tie it into AI. Like photography at that point was one of those things where they were just like, well, we don't need artists anymore. Everyone, we figured it out. We don't need artists anymore. We could just take pictures of the real world. We got it. We figured it out. And I mean, some of that is in response to that, this idea that no, there's still something that is ineffable, that escapes, right? But I mean, I also think you're right that, like, you know, even within split fiction, like the stuff they have that is unfinished, particularly like when it gets deeper into the Yeah, Fatal Frame's thesis is that cameras can capture spirits. So it's actually the opposite. Fatal Frame contradicts Bart in that way, in a very powerful sense.
Yeah, I think we're gonna get Tezor to come on that episode, and
I would
really
love that. Yeah, I honestly like I need to hear how Fatal Frame is about like an actual sort of like explicit critique of camera lucida. But yeah, like like the fact that it ties in with AI, and what was I saying there? Oh yeah, like those ideas, those sort of nascent ideas they have, like the shark world or whatever that that the one that I forget her name, that non-Mio has, um, uh, where she's trying to explain it, and she's like, I don't know, like it's just this thing, like it kind of exists. It's like it's a fun idea. It has like a lot of meaning, sort of like packed in there, but I don't know. I didn't ever figure it out. Like that is so hard for them to share with each other. It's fractured and weird, and like having someone experience that is embarrassing and strange. And I feel like split fiction really cares about the fact that like these characters are uncomfortable sharing with each other, and part of that is because like sharing one's emotional resonance with a thing is embarrassing, and without a mind delving device may be impossible also.
Yeah, but split fiction is very preoccupied with that idea, though, is that like there is a literal meaning to everything in art, whereas like I feel like a lot to most of sci-fi and fantasy authors are like, I thought this sounded cool. Like I've seen a lot of art. I liked the way that this art from this civilization looked. I like sharks. I think putting those two things together, I think it would be kind of cool. Like, I don't think that everything is about your singular trauma. And I feel like reducing an author to saying like everything is coming from this like one instance of something in their life, and that everyone's just like neurotic about one thing, and that's the only place that art can come from. Like, whenever there's not really like a dissenting idea against that in split fiction, which I think is probably like, if there's a critique of it, I think that that's probably my primary one, is like, I mean, couldn't one of the worlds have been like, yeah, I thought this was cool,
right?
Like,
yeah, exactly.
I liked it.
No, it doesn't all stem back to the one trauma you uncover in Act 5. Yeah, I think part of that is because it's like it is that sort of like auto critique of, this is a game about games making, or this is a film about filmmaking, or a book about writing books, or whatever. Like, I feel like those are fascinating, but often end up being like, I'm thinking of, have you played The Hex?
Mm-mm.
It's a neat game. It's by what is that guy's name? I'm gonna look it up because there on my Steam, it's up right now. Everyone should go play the Unbeatable demo. It's very good. But the Hex is on sale. It's $1.99 right now. So definitely go check it out. Daniel Mullins, who did Pony Island and more recently Inscription. And making a Pony Island too. That's neat. But the Hex is pretty neat. It's about like, basically it starts as a video game, but you start realizing it's like a video game that sort of opens up into this whole library of a person making video games. And it's cool, but one of the criticisms I would make about it is like it imagines that everything in this person's like oeuvre comes back again, just like within split fiction, to like this one preoccupation and guilty sort of like inadequacy that he has in making these things, right? Like he wants to make art and never can get back to the fun. And I feel like, you have to have that kind of stuff to, make a coherent narrative, because you need sort of like an inciting incident and a conclusion sometimes. Mm-hmm. But I agree with you. I think that is not reflective of actually what like composition and artistic creation is, which is why, like, as much as I love the Hex, and as much as I love, if you want to get into film, like Citizen Kane, I feel like something like The Bicycle Thieves, like Italian realism, just like a story that is meandering and has no moral and is naturalistic and boring and frustrating and beautiful. Like, I think that is more of an an actual sort of like tribute to creation than something like Citizen Kane, which is a brilliant film, but like, you know, is like explicitly about like, oh yeah, Kane did all this because of Rosebud. It's like, all right, yeah, it's like that's the one thing, right? It's not really, yeah, that's not really how anything works.
It is really interesting though that in split fiction it's like it has that explicit text that is saying, you know, this is why you make art, but then I feel like so much of art is about just the act of play and fun.
Right.
And they do that in the actual making of the game. Like they're showing like this is play, this is fun, and like so it's like these kind of like opposing narratives through like the explicit narrative opposes like what the gameplay is actually doing. It's not saying like we made this like really technical. I mean, they do like flex a lot of play and technical skills in it, that they make so many mechanics, like so many like discrete mechanics for like one moment for it to be cool and then just move on from it. Like they're showing like, you know, we can do this, and but it's all like in regards to having a good time. Like it's all leading to this idea of play, but then they aren't really allowing their authors in the text to like have that same play drive.
Yeah, I think like, you know, what you're describing reminds me a lot of the sort of like tension between form and function, and or like, I guess not form and function, but form and content. In video games, the fact that like, I was thinking about something like, you know, the Metal Gear series, even the fact that like, you know, the text is saying one thing, which is pretty interesting in my mind, the particularly like, you know, there's no such thing as a hero, but then as the series goes on and you have to like appeal to audience expectations and narrative expectations and stuff, it's like, oh no, but there is one hero. There's like one big hero. His name's Solid Snake, and sometimes he's not that. Sometimes he's something else, and it's complicated who he is. But no, there's a hero. Don't worry. And I think you sort of get the same thing here, where like playing the fun mechanics of it is the real joy of the game. Whereas like the core of the game is like, oh, forget the mechanics and stuff. Well, it's not what it's about. It's what's underneath that counts. It's like, well, the game didn't say that. I think. I also agree that it is like 20 fairly well executed mechanics that would have been the core conceit of a PS2 platformer back in the day.
Yeah, like even just like the parkour bits could have been their own kind of thing, and all of the racing bits, like there's so many different types of racing and they all feel pretty good. And I don't know if we talked about it on the episode actually, is that like I played it with mouse and keyboard, and it was like it was I mean, some things were definitely like designed to be done with a gamepad, like anything where you had to like rotate.
Oh,
like
sure.
You know, that's harder to do with a mouse.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's like good thing I have, you know, a gamer mouse pad that I can just like do like big, you know, strokes with.
You gotta have a gamer mouse pad. I got one of those too. It's a real game changer.
Yeah. So it was there's like a lot to take in that could have been like its own game.
Yeah, which I think like, you know, one of the critiques, maybe of both actually, like one, you know, it's I really love Death of the Author. I thought it was a pretty brilliant novel, but like I think one critique you could make of it is that it kind of understood the, oh, what is the fiction and what is the truth, you know, whose story is being written thing, and maybe leans a little heavily on that when there's like these really interesting sort of dynamics to work out within Zelu and stuff. But, you know, more or less, I think it does a good job. I think this is definitely something you can level more at Split Fiction, in that like the mechanics feel so good that the story almost feels like, okay, like it has to be there to justify all these mechanics, but like, can we just get back to the parkour? Can we get back to the racing? Can we get back to the fun? Yeah, I wish they would have, I guess thinking about it after the fact, I wish they would have married those a little better.
I do feel like that's like part of it with Death of the Author too, is that it's able to, like the way that Split Fiction kind of like flits across all these mechanics, and it's like I can show you all these things, like in the same way like that kind of happens here too, where it's like I can show you this technology, I can show you this family drama, and I can show you this like future world where there's still going to be different sects of consciousness. But again, you can collaborate in creation, and and it's about all of those things discreetly, but it's also all of those things like on a continuum.
Yeah.
So I do feel like they are similar in that respect too, that neither one of them is trying to put all of its eggs in like one basket, that it's about the fact that it is all of these things coming together.
That is true. And that's a really nice way of looking at it, actually, because I think like there's an urge to have a plenitude of ideas and concepts and thoughts and, mechanics, for lack of a different word, like in both texts. Like, I think, one of the things that is really, I guess, I don't want to say like advertised because that gives it the wrong feel, but like one of the things that the reviews for Death of the Author that are included on the front, like the pull quotes from George R. R. Martin and stuff, really, really lay on is like there's like 4 novels in here, definitely 3, maybe 4 novels, and like it's true, and it's not in a way that you're just like, oh yeah, which I think maybe with our next novel, which we'll talk about, we might see a little bit of. It's not so much of like, oh yeah, and you have to like figure out which one is which. It's much more like, no. The capacity of 3 or 4 novels is in here. The urge to speak in 4 different ways is in here, and I think you can make the same claim for split fiction, maybe in a less grandiose way. That like there are a number of games happening here. There's a number of ways of playing here. There's a number of ways of interacting that are all corresponding with each other, even though they usually live apart. And I think, that particularly within a culture that, I will say this of AI, that it is urging more singular things. Like, okay, if you're going to make this, it's going to look like, make it look like Mishima, or not Mishima. Because all my AI Mishima stuff. I've really shown my hand at this point.
Oh gosh.
Oh no, this is how it ends.
Tweeting with Philip K. Dick.
Yeah, this is bad. This is what happens when you get old. You just like become senile and start mixing your wires. But no, like like you have to say like, oh, I want it to look like the Miyazaki, or I want it to look like this, or oh, I'm doing a sci-fi thing, or I'm doing this. Like, I feel like genre is becoming much more stuck when people are making AI slop. It's always the same thing. It's never like you're using AI to break genre or anything like that. You're using it to codify it. And these things that are sort of like pushing away from that codification and into like, oh yeah, it's a multiplicity, and you can't extract one thing from this without missing the point of the text. I think that's something to really be celebrated.
Yeah, I think it also like celebrates the idea of authorship. Like, yeah, I can imagine worlds that you can't, and I'm about to tell you about them. Like, that's. And like Zelu is like proud, and I feel like it's a proud book. Like, it's like, yeah, I can do this. You couldn't have done this. Like, only I could have like put this text out here in this way. Like,
yeah,
an automation can't take that.
No, you're right. And it is like, I will say the novel puts automation in its place in a lot of ways. Like, yes, it can help Zelu in a number of ways, but it's never intellectually. It's never an intellectual sort of help. At least not someone that I can really remember being impactful. And any time where like it offers intellectual help, she is skeptical, like with the app that Zizi gives to her initially. And then, ultimately just kind of acts as like a little personal reminder assistant. It doesn't actually help her intellectually. It just like organizes her thoughts, which the book makes clear is not the same.
Yeah. Incoming drop for next GGNoReread text parent. Let's go.
Okay.
I do think
all right.
So excited because I have been meaning to read this book forever. And for our next GGNoReread, we're going to be looking at weird, spooky houses, and we're going to be reading House of Leaves.
That's right.
Mark Z. Danielewski.
And
we're going to be playing What Remains of Edith Finch. Yep. So
it is exciting to get back to What Remains of Edith Finch. I played that game once badly. And so not that there's not like it's not like you can't beat it. Not badly in that way. It's not like I played Battletoads badly.
I mean, I started reading this once badly. You can see that I still have my bookmark from whenever I first tried to read it. I'm only like that far into it.
That's what's up.
So I'm excited to get to actually have to commit to reading it all the way through and then actually getting to talk about it. And I feel like that should be motivating for people, because I do think a lot of people ideally think of themselves as reading House of Leaves. Like, I don't think it's like an Infinite Jest kind of book, like, but I think it's kind of adjacent to that, where they're like, yeah, I've been meaning to get to that, or, you know, but it feels like such a project to read. And I think thinking of reading it with your friends over here on No Cartridge, hopefully is an exciting prospect.
It's way more fun. It's way more fun than you think it is. It's like way more sort of playful. I don't know. I'm revisiting it. I read it in like 2009, 2010, so it's been a long time. But maybe I'll hate it this time around. Who knows? But like, I enjoyed it. There's definitely, you know, like, people say it's a little bit broy or whatever, but like,
see, this is why we're reading it together, though. This is
I think there's tons of stuff in there. Its reputation is intimidating. I feel like the text itself is not as intimidating as you think it is. Like, I will say, the one really lasting response to me of reading House of Leaves was how much I enjoyed and looked forward to reading the footnotes that they would put in. They got weird. It was like really super interesting, and like, you can get really engrossed in it, and it does not make you feel stupid. It makes you feel like you're exploring. It would have been easy. Actually, we already covered it, but it would have been obviously a great pairing with Blueprints also. So, you know, if you liked Blueprints, I think there's no reason you wouldn't like House of Leaves. There's a similar sort of urge there.
Yeah, you're right. That would have been a good pairing, but
and that's okay. What remains of Edith is an even better pairing.
I think that we wouldn't have really known how good it would have been as a pairing with Blueprints until after that. I mean, that's kind of like what I haven't. I'm not familiar with The Third Policeman.
Oh, that's I know is there a film of The Third Policeman? Of course I'm thinking of what is that? Flann O'Brien. Oh yeah, okay. 1939 and 1949. I need to read that. I don't think I actually ever read that. Which I really, really should. There's not a film, but I'm also thinking of what is it? The Police. Oh yeah, Flow My Tears, The Policeman's Dead. Was what I was thinking of. That's I
have that on my shelves, but haven't read it yet.
It's a neat one.
I think I saw something he tweeted recently, though.
Was it about Flow My Tears, The Policeman's Dead, and how good it is?
Oh,
that's okay. Yeah, that's like really, really similar to how the work feels in House of Leaves. I'll also say it feels a little bit like the kind of like myth making that you see in 2666 as well. If you've read that, another
I haven't read that yet either. That would be a good.
That would be book. Something. Yeah, we would have to take. That's like 1,000-page book. That's maybe my favorite book, though. That's one of the top 3. But anyway, I'm excited to reread House of Leaves very much so. I've kept that around on my shelf for a long time.
And even thinking forward to the last quarter of the year, is like, we have not decided what we're doing for that GGNoReread yet. It was I was thinking that like our Q2 one had to be rescheduled due to the Microsoft boycotts, and like that's still ongoing. So I don't think that's going to be put in place of the Q4. But I think that with those months of the year, those are kind of like the busiest months of the year to try to fit in something whenever you have like Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas back to back, going into New Year's. So I think that like having some sort of audience input on what would be maybe a book that people have already read and want to, kind of like briefly touch back up on, or
definitely,
or something like that. Like, I think that would be a fun little thing, is like having like a an input on either like the game or the book. I think I don't really know what the barrier to like people participating more is, if it's like the accessibility of the book or I don't know, interest in whatever the current book is. But I would love to like have something that people are like really excited about for quarter 4.
Yeah, me too. So, get on the Discord, tweet at us, whatever you need to do. We want to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. But this was so fun to talk about it again. I really liked having like, it's so fun that we got to like talk on like adjacent topics today. Like, spend more time on these like, I guess kind of tangents.
And stuff that I like, there was stuff that we ended the episode and I was like, oh, I didn't talk about that. We didn't talk about that. I'm sure it'll happen again, but like, it's nice to have at least one chance to be like, there's some stuff we didn't talk about. Let's talk about it now.
Yeah. I've been trying to think of like, after Dylan said this about the like philosopher thing, like that reminds me so much of something and I can't figure out what. So like,
does it remind you of Umberto Eco and The Name of the Rose?
Oh yeah, maybe so. I also read a book fairly recently that it's like it's called We Used to Live Here, and it is also kind of like about a weird house, and there's like also weird footnotes and weird mythology to all of it. But I think Name of the Rose is actually what I was thinking of about like of that. Even the introduction that's like, I found this text or whatever. I found this manuscript.
It's such a great thing to see, because like it's a that lie of I found this thing and now I'm giving it to you is such a good and rich literary tradition that I feel like people are embarrassed by, because like it feels bad to say like, well, Elizabeth Barrett Browning didn't actually find the sonnets from the Portuguese. Like, she wrote them. She didn't find them on a beach when she was vacationing with Robert, like she said. Maybe it feels a little embarrassing to say that. Like, you don't want to say Elizabeth Browning's a liar. But she is.
You don't want to say that the kids were lying about the Blair Witch, that they didn't actually.
But they are, and that's part of the artistry. And I think bringing that back is always exciting. So I'm all for. I mean, as you'll see in House of Leaves, folks who are reading this, the idea of, hey, I found this stuff is very, very important to House of Leaves.
Yeah. I like that idea of like considering all of those texts in the continuum of found footage history. That The Name of the Rose is a found footage book.
I really love that Sonnets from the Portuguese is a
found footage.
Is a found footage. It's so unbelievable. Like, what was the? I want to actually see like if there's a. Oh yeah, she was hesitant to publish the poems. Oh yeah, it was even better. She thought they were too personal, so she didn't want to publish them. But her husband was very supportive and said they were the best sequence of English language sonnets since Shakespeare's time. They really loved each other a lot. But offered the couple some privacy. She decided to publish this if they were translations of foreign sonnets, which is so good. Like, you've never read these, but they're translations of some random author I found.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting too, in like, I guess like women authors of, like thinking about like Jane Austen or like the Brontes, like publishing under like men's names, and that's kind of like I mean, it's more than just a pseudonym if you're saying like you're kind of giving that authority back to like the realm of literature to men, that you're like
George Eliot's still mostly known as George Eliot. So I think that's a great example. Like, and the Austens and Brontes are known, but like, I don't even know what George Eliot's actual name is. No. Marianne Evans. It's just fascinating to think about that, as because you're right, it's more than a pseudonym. It's giving something back and then also borrowing from, hoping that like, okay, so this thing that I'm doing, this sort of like concession I'm making also allows me leeway I wouldn't have if I didn't make it.
Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to it. I hope that I hope that people are excited to read it. Hopefully, I think, get started soon, because I think 3 months, this is, I think, probably the longest. I don't know, maybe Name of the Rose is longer than this. But
maybe, yeah.
The episode should come out at the probably last week of September, and then we'll do another book club live in October. And so hopefully this is like spooky enough to start off your October with.
It's very spooky. We're going to be so spooky.
Yeah. Maybe we'll
I'm gonna put on corpse paint for it.
That's what I was like, should we dress up? I don't know how you dress up for House of Leaves.
I'll be wearing a t-shirt, but I'll paint my face like a black metal band member. That'll be really good, right?
Yeah. I think that we should do like the Norwegian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense. It's just like that's how we should do it. Okay, cool. Well, it's a deal then. We'll do that.
Yeah. So any final words on Death of the Author? I see that there's like a couple people have like trickled in now. Any questions on?
Yeah, if anyone has any questions before we head out. I mean, for me, I would say I think it's I genuinely think it's a book you should read, even if you didn't even if you didn't follow us through the GGNoReread, or you're sort of coming upon this now. I mean, I don't think it's. I would say pairing it with split fiction is really, really rewarding, but I would probably say save split fiction until you can play it with someone. I watched it on video, and you can listen to the podcast for a little more of my reasoning behind that. But I thought that was valuable and interesting, but it looks like so much fun, and Liv seconded that. I'd say, go ahead and read Death of the Author now. It's a really, really neat book. If you look it up, you'll see some people on Reddit saying like, I don't know about this. Like, are people interested in this book? I don't find Nnedi Okorafor's prose very interesting. I don't know what those people are on, because the prose is fascinating and perfect. I think she's a wonderful wordsmith. I think you will enjoy it.
Yeah, and kind of writing. I mean, she is writing from two different voices in the book. That there's definitely two texts going on in this book, and then there's a lot going on. So she can write in a lot of different styles. It is interesting that like I don't think that a lot of people who necessarily read like George R. R. Martin, or that are reading other kinds of sci-fi, are like used to seeing I guess more feminine topics, or like how sex is described. Like it's very straightforward. Like it's not it is like kind of de-romanticizing sex in like some ways too. Yeah. And like I think that it's for a purpose, but maybe people aren't used to like reading that in science fiction, and they think it kind of belongs in a different type of text, like a women's fiction or a romance or something like that. But there's a lot going on here.
I mean, there's a ton of I don't know, elements of literary fiction here, but I don't think one of the elements of literary fiction that's not here is it's not metaphorical and symbolic to the point that it is unreadable. I think it feels good to read it. It doesn't feel like it's a slog by any stretch of the imagination. So I think you should check it out.
Yeah. And like you said, like I don't think that you have to have read. Like, I don't think you have to do both at the same time. That's how we did it. That's how we like talking about things, because it's all to answer the greater question of, are video games art? And we will get to the bottom of
no one's figured it out
one
yet.
episode at a time.
We still could be the first to figure it out. Just stay tuned. One of these weeks, it's going to be amazing when we finally crack the code on that one.
Yeah, we're gonna get a peace prize for it for sure once we finally figure it out, one way or the other. I'm not.
The panel keeps asking me if we figured it out yet. They have it written up, the peace prize. It's all like chiseled on the little metal, but they can't give it to us until we're done. So
yeah. So yeah, thank you for supporting us in our work to get the peace prize.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. Everyone's support. I will forget you when I'm famous.
So,
it's a meta footnote. Some of those footnotes are the scariest part of the text. I will tell you that just straight up. I was legitimately. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was legitimately spooked by by some of those footnotes. Scary.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get back to it.
Definitely.
I remember it being weird. I love, and like I've talked about it too before about how much I love weird architecture and like kind of like haunted, impossible, old god architecture stuff going on.
Yeah, no, you'll have fun with this one then. I think everyone, I genuinely, I think it's a neat book. I think it's something you should definitely read if you like scary stuff or architecture or, you know, metafiction or all those things. That it's good. So I'm getting tired enough that I'm not being coherent. So we probably should wrap it on up.
Yeah, we're about to wrap this up. If you're just joining now, this will be on VOD, so you can just go back to the beginning as soon as the stream's over and
Please
watch
do
it.
not worry.
We said a lot of really smart stuff that made the Nobel Committee very close to just pushing it on through.
I'm getting tons of texts from Denmark or wherever the Nobel Prize is given, and they keep saying in Danish or whatever language. Come on, man. Just get on it.
So we're definitely reading House of Leaves and playing What Remains of Edith Finch for our next episode that'll be out at the end of September. But then for quarter 4, be in our Discord, be in our Twitter Blue Sky ads, and tell us what kind of books you might be interested in reading whenever we're kind of short on time at the end of the year. We don't want to make anyone's lives difficult. So
yeah, and if you don't comment, it's going to be the worst Christmas
the
present
Bible
ever. It's going to be the whole Bible, and then we're going to play Bible Adventures. See how they line up.
Yeah, we're gonna play Space Station Silicon Valley and feel what it feels like to be a god.
We're gonna play Sim Ant and feel what it feels like to be a god.
Well, maybe we will, but we will. We'll I'm sure we'll do a reading sprint at some point, even though this is probably the weirdest book to do a reading sprint for. And then we'll be live on this channel again in October. I upload every week on this channel just book stuff not related to No Cartridge. And then you can find Trevor on Twitter at Hagelbon, on Blue Sky at No Cartridge. And yeah, listen to our episodes of No Cartridge weekly. We'll be, I think next week we'll have an episode out on a movie, one of our film clubs. So that'll be fun. And we'll talk to y'all again soon. Any last words, Trev?
No, just appreciate everyone coming out and hanging out with us. This was fun.
Yep. All right. Talk to y'all again soon. Bye. Peace.